Described in part 2 here, number 2 here, to elicit a professional opinion of the likelihood of the success of a judicial review of the Council's process in relation to the 19th of December 2011 decision. So that's what it's all about. If it's clearly favourable, then we need to look at the best way of going about a judicial review. And at the same time, if the costs are considered to outweigh the risks, this would be the final stage, to approach our supporters for additional funding to pursue a full judicial review. Now, just some conditions for this, which I think are worth mentioning also. We can only do this step at a time, and it's very easy and understandable to ask the question, how long is this, what's it going to cost, the whole of this process? And it depends a little bit on the route and so on, but it can be very expensive, especially if you lose, and especially if you have to pay for the cost of the other side. So it's not to be entered into lightly, hoping that it will work. So we need the funds, and we need positive advice. Another condition is that we are having discussions as much as we can with stakeholders. We've mentioned meetings today with Network Rail and Solon a couple of weeks ago. It was a good meeting, very constructive. We need to keep those kind of discussions going. They may lead somewhere. And if they do, and if they lead to the kind of station we'd all like to see, that would be a fantastic solution. It would be our preferred route. So we would very much like to keep that option open. And also, if we don't run out of time, we've heard about the judicial review process taking a maximum of 3 months. There's an issue of promptness involved there. That really needs to be cracking about halfway through that period. So there are issues of, we need to look at in terms of the timetable. And of course, there's a lead time to getting to the point of launching a judicial review, particularly if you want to look at the feasibility of it, because that takes time to set up and to get a response from it. And I think finally, only if the final result will be positive in terms of delivering a low-rise design for the station. I think what we're saying by that is really, if in a year's time, all we're doing is delaying, and we know that the likelihood of getting that kind of station is diminishing. I doubt if that would be a sensible thing to continue. So we don't want to be just doing it for, be costly about it, if you like, and be stubborn about it. We need to look at it very rationally. But we're not at that point at this point in time. So we put, one of the things we need to put to you tonight is just to what degree that you can support this process. We have no idea. We're going to talk, we're going to have questions and answers now? Yeah. Why don't we have them now? Because we can go into this a bit later. So, who would like, you've got a question, I see.
How much do we need to raise in the initial split?
Well, estimates are it could be anything like £10,000 to pay for that initial back. It's going to be a good QC who's we want a really good advice. Of course, it could be less, but we want to make sure we get a good advice.
Do you have someone in mind already?
Well, we have in Trad, we have 1 or 2 people who are solicitors or involved in that side of things. I'm not a solicitor. Richard is a solicitor. So yes, they do have people in mind. We'll talk to them. And
how soon can you start talking to them?
I'd have to ask them, but I don't see why we can't talk to them very quickly. But my son's a barrister, and I know if you want to get a barrister to do something, you have to get in line. So I think there's nothing different than any other QC, and any QC who's sought after is going to take maybe a little bit longer. It's Easter. QCs and others like to go on holiday at Easter. So there's all those kind of issues to be thought about.
Hello, microphone here, Judy Bunting.
My name is Chris, I'm managing Corporate. I'd just like to make a very brief observation here. I'm sure it's obvious to a lot of people, but it seems to me that the zoning sector enables ton of money out of all of this if their scheme goes ahead. And there seems equally, on the other hand, to be complete disregard for due process. I'm all in favour of the negotiations you guys have been talking about in terms of trying to persuade the Solent to come to some sort of compromise and go for a scheme that the residents of Twickenham and the region would prefer. But it just seems that the vested interest is simply going to be too strong, and that the judicial review is really going to be the only route that's going to work, since it's only the judicial process that's going to be able to overturn the complete disregard of the democratic process.
You may know the rights. We're trying to set up ourselves so that we're not relying on that happening, and we understand that exactly. You know, if we can keep people the benefit of the doubt for as long as we are able, that's okay. But we don't want to prejudice going down the judicial review route. And there's some funding and advice aspects down that before we take it. So that we need to, if there is a signature which we have no control about to happen, then we really get our skates on.
Resident of Heathfield South. Just following on perhaps from that last question, I've been really energised and enthused by Plan B, but I just wonder about the judicial review. It's more than 3 months since the planning meeting of the 19th of December. Do we know that for sure that the Section 106 date is the key date and not the 19th of December?
We do, and you know, the actual planning permission won't come into effect until the 106 agreement is signed. That's the legal agreement between the council and the developer. What was granted on the 19th of December was a resolution to grant planning approval, subject to the signing of the 106 agreement, and also subject to the direction of the mayor. You know, because it was a strategic project, he's now directed or avoided directing by passing it on to his head of paid services, and thereby removing the ability to call that application in. However, you know, we suspect that this is a political decision. You know, it comes probably from the highest level in order to deliver, you know, a new station to Twickenham in advance of the Rugby World Cup. And unfortunately, I think, you know, we're faced with that sort of, you know, fight, you know, on our hands.
Good evening, John Armstrong, very long-term member, resident in the borough. I know that the two of you have been aware of a number of missives that I have sent you, but I just want to concentrate our minds and when you could come to make your future presentation. That really is the process that happened at the meeting on the 19th of December. I really was quite appalled that it seemed the decision seemed to be divided on a political basis, and the excuse that seemed to come out of this was that the people, the group of councillors who were in favour, were suggesting that they wanted to defend the borough against costs of having a proper inquiry before an inspector. Now, if they were prejudging the decision then, that is really quite outrageous use of the planning process, and it really should not be supported. And I hope that you can certainly highlight that point when you come to, when and if you come to the judicial presentation. Thank you.
so long, and taking on Plan B for the reasons that you just given, or are they stringing you along and wasting your time?
Well, if there weren't any other options, you could say they were stringing along. I mean, we're keeping an ear to the ground all the time and watching the lead times that we have to work with, particularly on this judicial review. So, I don't think we are in danger of not hearing about the Section 106 agreement. But they could be stringing us along from that point of view. We just don't know. I mean, if we were only relying on that, we would be at their mercy.
So, just a supplementary, is there any chance, do you think, of them adopting Plan B?
I think that Plan B offers a viable, profitable scheme for an investment, of circa 22 million pounds, 23 million pounds. And what one has to examine is the risks associated with building across the railway line, and all the inherent problems you're going to get with that. If you're going to build something which is, a third to almost a half bigger than Plan B, there are multiple risks, that you're going to have to take. They're going to have to weigh up whether it's worth taking, a profit of, £7 million, which coincidentally is the figure that they've actually alluded to in their presentations to the council in terms of their return. But we've heard figures of 11 million elsewhere, and nobody knows because we're not party to the financial appraisal that was submitted. That was scrutinised by an independent valuer. It was independently scrutinised by the district valuer's office, and they confirmed that they were satisfied with the viability assessment that we put forward. We don't know what their true level of profitability is. What we do know is that there are huge risks in building across the railway line, and you've got to examine, do you want to build a huge structure as they are currently proposing, or do you want to build something which is quite modest with the bulk of your enabling development next to the station rather than directly above it? I think that's for them. In terms of do we feel that there's a chance? I think there's always a chance. There is always a slim chance, that you could do this. They have to be prepared to accept that the investment that they've made to date, may have to be, written off, and that may be an uncomfortable, thing for them to do. What I would also say is that there is no guarantee that they will actually build this station in time for Rugby World Cup, because the planning consent that they've been granted has no drop-dead date that they have to, they could actually, bank the planning consent and, do the minimum of work, in 3 years' time to safeguard their consent and come back to it in 5 or 6 years or more. So nobody knows whether they intend to deliver, and that's a big question as well.
Check that if the judicial review does not go ahead, what happens to everyone's money?
Well, it says here that I pledge something to support the judicial review. I mean, if that's what you're pledging, we need to keep track of all of that, and so that we know who's given to that specific purpose. I mean, TRAG itself, people will give to TRAG funds. TRAG isn't necessarily just to do the station. You can see this other thing happening at the other side of the road, and TRAG means Twickenham Residents Action Group. And so if there are other issues we feel we can help the residents resolve, we'll continue to do that. But if someone gives something to a judicial review process and it's not used, we have to decide what's proportional and what's right to do with that money. And so we will keep it as a separate amount when it has that decided. We've got more questions. Sorry, Terry, yeah.
find out whether there are reasons for judicial review, and I suspect, as Lane or otherwise, are all fairly disappointed by the process of the union and there will be judicial review. But we don't have 3 months, we have less than 3 months. The court's likely to get on with it, but we reject. So I suggest probably 6 weeks from the section 06 to challenge, and that's why I think the statement of law and the resident, if you want to object, the time to object. We've had success in the past. The residents managed to stop the podium application successfully, notwithstanding the politics of leaving the planning committee, so to reduce the scale of their development. And I think this is the final opportunity we now have as residents to stop this development and get the developer to talk, but we're only do that with strength, not just by dialogue, which picks up the clock to their advantage, not ours. So this is very timely. We don't have much time to lose if we want to get a professional opinion on where we stand as residents.
Yeah, you're saying it's really important to react to it right at this point in time, aren't you? In order to
We don't have 3 months. We need
No.
and see if we have funds to make a professional consideration whether there are grounds to object, and I think variously residents believe that there are potential grounds that should be considered and brought to the attention of the courts, and so as we'll respect the process as well today.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Thank you very much.